This is a collaboration between GPS STEM. When I was part of GPS STEM many years ago, we worked with ICTS to offer this program based on certain mentoring requirements, or not only that requirement for funding agencies, but also we thought that we need to have a good mentoring culture at UCI. And it's one of our efforts in making it maybe a curriculum-based mentoring program instead of just getting about mentoring in patches. So this is a program you enroll into. You're going to be engaged with this thing for 7 weeks. There are 7 modules, and a lot of different units came together to offer this program. This program is based on SIMMER. How many have heard about SIMMER program? It's from UW-Madison. It's called Center for Implementing Mentored Experiences and Research. I got it this time. And it's one of those places which is a pioneer, and they are really setting the best practices in mentoring training in the country. Right, can you go to the next slide? There are a lot of people who've been involved in doing this program, building the curriculum and really executing it last year. Now more people are getting involved. So I want to introduce, first of all, thank Lauren, who could not be here. She's the, I'm sure you all know her. She's the current director of GPS STEM program. She's enjoying the conference. I don't know if you can enjoy the conference, depending on, I don't know. So she's going to be there joining us remotely. And then we have Marguerite from ICTS. She's been working with us in making sure this program is a success. That's Rinder. And we have Dr. Cayuzo and Dr. Fruman. You want to introduce yourself briefly, and then I'll talk about the course and the leaders.
All right, well, my name is Vince Cayuzo. I'm a professor in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. If you have any orthopedic issues, come see me. I also have a joint appointment in physiology and biophysics. I've been here a very long time. I started here in 1979. This place at that time had, I think, 7,000 total students, so much different environment. I've been very fortunate to be part of the Institute for Clinical and Translational Science. This is a NIH-funded entity, National Institutes of Health. And in that program, we have a mentored career development component that I lead, and Marguerite tells me what to do on a daily basis. She's a really nice boss. And our mission is to help promote pre-doctoral, postdoctoral, and even early career faculty. And we do that through the funded program that funds pre-docs, postdocs, and early career faculty. And so it's my pleasure to be here with each and every one of you, and also to have wonderful colleagues like Rinder and Dr. Fruman.
Yeah, so I'm David Fruman. I'm a professor and now chair of the Department of Molecular Biology and Biochemistry in the school, Farley Dunlop School of Biological Sciences. I've been here since 2000, so a little more than half at the same time as Vince. I remember when I was on iCook going to see the experiments you were doing on weightlessness in space. Anyway, that's besides the point. So I founded GPS Biomed originally GPS Biomed to help people become more professional in their approach to finding careers in academia and outside of academia. And during the time that Harinder was the director of the program and I was academic director, we were both motivated to launch something like this, and in partnership with ICTS, we were able to accomplish that. I always had great mentors, and I wanted to pay it forward. And Harinder didn't always have great mentors. Other people to become better mentors themselves. So this program, in modifications of it, has been available to faculty. It's becoming mandated, or at least recommended, for many faculty groups now in a slightly different form. And I'll say a few more things about mentoring when we come back, but that's my introduction.
Thank you, David. So just as David mentioned, I always thought there's only one reason to offer a mentoring program if you have had a bad mentor, which is what I had. So if I can actually share, my mentor from postdoc is blocked on my cell phone, my emails. I can get into that story some other day, but that was my experience. And the other reason is if you've been a good mentor and you really enjoyed and been able to be successful because of mentoring relationship, then you try to offer the same mentoring for the next generation. And the third reason, which you might think that I'll be doing it just because it's a requirement from funding agencies. No, I think they may be doing whatever they're asking us to do because they realize that this is a very, very important thing. So I don't know how many of I just said her in the saying I was part of GPS STEM for a couple of years, And then now currently I'm in the Department of Physiology and Biophysics. I'm into medical education, all the first year. Some of the courses are run by me. Other than that, I have an appointment in ICTS, Institute for Clinical and Translational Science, where I do the workforce development, which involves mentoring, training, and there's a master's program and a lot of different things which related to curriculum development and training for PhD students, postdocs, and early career faculty. We can get the next slide. So I just wanted to give you more like, a glance what this curriculum is going to be about. During these 7 weeks, this is, I call it a flower, mentoring flowers, and you're going to go through all these different petals of it. We're going to start with today's session with an introduction, and we'll introduce our speaker briefly, where you'll pretty much get a lay of the whole mentoring culture, environment, and how a good mentoring environment looks like and what you should really be aiming for. I know it's called mentoring training for you to become good mentors, but you're all mentees at this stage. But I think this is where our effort has been. We want to start early at this grassroots level so you understand what you should be aspiring towards when you become mentors yourself. And also second things, being a mentee, you really need to know what you deserve as a mentee from your mentor. So these modules, you will learn that, all the skills and the traits your mentor should have. And then you can always work with your mentor and make sure that they're able to provide these things. And it also helps with kind of removing some of the miscommunication and misunderstandings and understanding where mentor or advisor might be coming from. That'll really help you to nurture and build and create good mentoring environment culture. We'll go through aligning expectations, assessing, understanding. This is the very important communication part piece I talked about. Ethical and behavior, ethical behavior in mentoring. Oftentimes we hear like very unethical mentoring, and I think I'm probably a product of that, but I'm a good mentor. I guess sometimes bad mentoring helps you to be a good mentor. And equity and then biases. There's a lot of unconscious bias which exists. We all need to be aware about that, and I think this module will help you with that. Independence in academia. That's one topic which becomes more relevant as if you want to enjoy research and doing science, you do not want just what you've been told. You would like to enjoy the process, have your own freedom of thought and ideas, and really carve a future for yourself. And this module will basically walk you through that. The last part is the professional development. A good mentoring environment or a good mentor is the one who encourages your professional development, who makes sure that, it doesn't matter, who's not trying to make you clone of themselves. They're helping you to move forward in life, whether it's staying in academia or going beyond academia and industry. And we will get into that. Dr. Fuhrman and Lauren will get into that. So after having done these things, well, I think important thing, pre-survey. How many of you have filled out the pre-survey? There was a survey which, okay, mostly have done that. If you have not got a chance to do that, please do that. That's very, very important for us because we are going to collect the data based on this, and there will be a post-survey after this course ends, and we will basically see and do a statistical significance on that, all that 25 different criteria to see if this course have had any impact on your understanding of how a good mentoring should be. This program will have speakers, we'll talk about the particular topic, and there'll be a lot of case studies we're doing. I just feel like, you sitting here and listening to what mentoring is probably is going to, yes, help, but unless you really analyze the real life situations, there are case studies which are coming from SIMR. These are the real situations which happened in the past. And then we want you to be able to think on your feet when you're thrown into this environment, how would you react and how would you analyze the situation? So we'll use case studies there. So after you go through this, we will do post-survey, which I talked about. That's very important. If you did pre-survey, please do post-survey. That helps to make sure the end is good, same both pre and post. And you will get a certificate of course completion.
One question.
Yes.
Where can I find the pre-course survey? Because maybe I filled it out, but I don't remember.
Yeah, so I think pre-survey was sent by Red Cat.
I can check for you.
Oh, thank you.
afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much about it. I don't know, do we have time or should we go to the next slide? Okay, again, these are all the reasons which I listed why mentoring is important. Mentoring really ensures that you're productive and you stay engaged and you enjoy your time in the academic research environment. It also makes sure that you stay connected with the mentor or the advisor you work with, not like me doesn't want to stay engaged because I don't think I got good mentoring. So it really ensures that your alumni is connected. It helps to make sure that there's a good recruitment and retention process also in place. When people hear about good mentoring environments, they want to come and be part of that institution. The next part, the next slide, Margaret, is basically about, what is the currently, what's wrong with mentoring in academia right now. We don't have to dwell into this thing, negative things, because we've come to realize that, by talking about bad mentoring, it doesn't really bring about a change. And what really brings about a change is talking about good mentors and rewarding and giving some sort of prizes to people who've been really serving as good mentors. But if really this really goes wrong, it can really have long-lasting consequences on your career. Right now, the way mentoring is done is pretty much like trial and error process. I am doing this because this is how I was trained. Or things like, I see this is what's going on in the neighboring lab. People are very strict. People are being micromanaged, and that's how I think get things done. That's kind of things how things are going. And there are, again, inadequate mechanisms of mentoring training. So this program is basically trying to accomplish that and provide you really a training environment so that you learn all the length and breadth and different aspects of mentoring. With that, I'll end. I won't go into too much detail. Now, I would invite Dr. Kaiser to come and introduce the speaker for today.
All right. Well, in putting this series of putting this course together, we really want to start out with an individual who really represents the top of the pyramid, if you will, of mentoring. And so we're really fortunate to have Dr. Mitchell Feldman from UCSF today. He's going to magically appear up here on the screen. There, I see the smiley face there. And Dr. Feldman's had a phenomenal educational trajectory and career. He started out as an undergraduate at one of the best premier institutions in the country, Johns Hopkins. From there, and by the way, he majored in anthropology, which I find very interesting. From there, he went to Cambridge, where he got a master's degree in social anthropology. And then from there, he actually went up to UCSF. And Mitch can correct me if I got this wrong, but it looks like he started a doctoral program in medical anthropology, which I find even more interesting.
That's
And then
correct.
is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. From there, he entered into medical school at one of the premier medical institutions in the country, which is UCSF. And he then did his residency training at UCSF and then ultimately became faculty. And he's risen through the ranks there to a very, very high level. Currently, he's the chief of general internal medicine at UCSF. He's also the associate vice provost. So when we start talking about provost, we're talking about the very, very top of the administration at any campus. And the thing that's fascinating about his appointment is that he's the associate vice provost for mentoring. And that tells you the value that institutions like UCSF place on the importance of mentoring. And beginning back in 2006, he really began to publish in the field of mentoring, so peer-reviewed publications related to mentoring, and directed the program, comparable program to the one that we have here at UCSF for a number of years. And I think I met Mitch when he gave his presentation back here, back probably, I'm going to say, was it 2015 or 16 maybe, when he first came down here?
Something like that. All I remember is that my son was an undergrad there. So
There you go. Yeah.
he's now a fourth-year psychiatry resident at UCSF. So it was a while ago.
Yeah. So as I said, Mitch is really one of the thought leaders in the field, and he has been for quite a period of time, and that's extended not only nationally, but internationally. And so with that, it's really, truly my pleasure to introduce Dr. Feldman. Mitch.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Harinder. Thank you, Marguerite, for all your support and help as well. Apologies, my voice is a little creaky today. I've got a cup of tea. Hopefully I'll make it through the next, hopefully I can still have about 90 minutes. I've got a lot of stuff I want to cover with you all. And of course, do the Zoom check here first. Are you seeing my presenter screen or my title slide only?
You're good to go. Yeah, we see perfect.
Good to go. All right. I've only done this, a million times, but I just need to check every time. You all were very, very small, but it looked like there's a number of people in the room. So we're not going to have time to go through introductions. But when you do have a question, and do feel free to raise your hand. And if somebody could monitor that for me, and just feel free to interrupt me and say there's a question, I'd be very happy to take them in real time and not wait till the end. I don't want you sitting there for the next 90 minutes passively. I have a couple of exercises for you all to do as well along the way. But if you do have a question, please do feel free to jump in. I'm going to split this into two parts. I know the focus of the next 7 weeks for you all is on mentorship, but I really thought it was important to introduce you to this idea of sponsorship. Most of you look pretty young in the room. I suspect that most of you are already familiar with this term, but I want to just get into it a little bit deeper and for you to be thinking about your effectiveness, not only as mentor and mentee, but also as sponsors and sponsees as well as you move along in your career. I'll have to go through this briefly given the time constraints, but I did want to share with you, and Vince kindly went through a bit of my career trajectory and journey, and it was not a straight line. And I think most interesting careers are not linear. So you'll be looking for opportunities and using your mentors to help open doors for you that you didn't even know were there, or that perhaps you didn't feel like you were even capable of walking through. And you do that for the folks who are coming behind you. So I'm just going to briefly go through. And of course, most of these people I didn't think of as mentors at the time. As I was coming up, we didn't really talk about mentoring. But in retrospect, Emily Martin was really the first academic mentor I had out of high school. She was an anthropology professor at Hopkins. Mention Emily because I got interested very early on in medical anthropology. It was a burgeoning field at the time. And lo and behold, when I left Hopkins, Emily started devoting her career to med-anthro topics as well, hence underscoring this concept of mentorship. I'll be coming back to it, which is this idea of reciprocity in a mentoring relationship. As Vince said, I then went off to Cambridge to study social anthropology under this gentleman, Gilbert Lewis, who's an MD PhD. Got me thinking I was on a path to do a PhD, was the first person to plant a seed into how to really combine my interest in culture and illness and culture and health and illness and the cultural context into thinking more, how can I do this potentially within the context of medicine? Although Gilbert was an MD, was not a practicing physician. He did his fieldwork in New Guinea. I then came to UCSF to start the PhD, as Vince mentioned, and met this gentleman, Fred Dunn, who was an amazing mentor, another MD, PhD medical anthropologist, who encouraged me to go to medical school. Saw what my interests were, and during my PhD program, I had experiences that sort of ignited my interest in clinical medicine, as well as my lifelong interest in health and culture. Tom Coates, when I was a junior faculty member at UCSF, I was knocking on doors saying I was hired as a clinician educator, but had a bit of research training and qualitative research in particular. And Tom took a risk on me. And now I realize what an amazing mentor and sponsor he was. He said, Mitch, I'm going to support 20% of your time. I'm going to give you an office down at the Center for Age Prevention Studies, and I want you to write a grant. I did. I used Tom as the PI on that grant, and we got that grant to study HIV/AIDS prevention, US and Japan comparison. And that led to a lifelong connection, both academically, professionally, as well as personally in Japan. And Tom, I got him invited to Japan through my work there, which also changed his life in really nice ways. As a junior faculty member at UCSF, I had two mentors, Steve McPhee and Molly Cook, who really represent the two spectrums of mentorship, of support and challenge. And probably all of you have a preference one way or the other in terms of how you interact and maybe what kind of mentors you feel more comfortable with. For me, it was great to balance support and challenge. When I met with Dr. McPhee, he'd always start off by saying, "How are your kids? How are things going at home?" I had 2 kids by the time I was a resident. How's your family going? Are you exercising enough? And then we'd get down to talking about my work and where I was going with my career. Dr. Cook, on the other hand, was much more challenging. "Mitch, if you're not getting up at 5 in the morning to write, no one's going to support your time to write papers here at UCSF. You want to get ahead, that's what you need to do." And I balanced that support and challenge and mentoring, which has been written about by a guy named Larry DeLoze in the educational literature. And you want to balance that. Too much challenge may lead to kind of withdrawal. Too much support, you may feel good but not get a whole lot done. So think about that for yourselves, both as mentees and mentors. And finally, Dr. Schroeder, who was founded the Division of General Internal Medicine that I lead 44 years ago, then went off to run the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and then came back to UCSF. So he started off interviewing me for residency, leaving UCSF, coming back with me as division chief. And so this flip where I've been using him as a mentor, but I'm now in a position to sponsor him, even though he's much further along in his career, much more senior than I. So these relationships shift over time, and you want to look for opportunities for continuing the connection and the relationship, but maybe redefining it in different ways as you move along. So what is mentorship? This is many definitions out there. I like this one from the National Research Mentoring Network, which defines it as a mutually beneficial and collaborative learning relationship. Really just focus on this mutually beneficial, the sense of reciprocity and collaboration in a mentoring relationship. What are the other components that make mentoring unique? We hope it's comprehensive. It goes beyond just support for your professional development, your career development, but is also around psychosocial development, kind of your development into a professional, into getting the competence and confidence to move along in your career. And that's a deeper, more complex relationship than one might have with a teacher or an advisor, etc. So again, you want to be thinking about that, all of you, as you're launching your career still and developing into mentors as you're maintaining mentoring relationships, to be looking for opportunities for more comprehensive and longitudinal relationships. We hope that these mentoring relationships go on for our professional lives, if possible. And underscoring that is this quote from one of the UCSF faculty mentees who said, "During the launching of my career, she was like a solid rocket booster, ensuring that I achieved the lift and trajectory to make it into orbit. But rather than dropping off at that point, she's remained a constant feature like mission control, monitoring my progress." I think a beautiful metaphor for a longitudinal nature of mentoring relationships. I've done quite a bit of teaching at Peking Union Medical College Hospital, including a mentor training course that I've been running for them for a number of years. The last time I did it in person was pre-COVID. Actually, I was just there about 6 months ago again, but the last time we had this formal course was in 2019. And these are the graduates of that mentor training program that I run for PUMCH. And one of the faculty came up to me after one of my lectures and said, "We have an expression here, a teacher for a day, a mentor for life. A teacher for a day, a mentor for life," which I think just beautifully captures that concept. All right, with that very brief and quick introduction or overview, I want to get you now a little bit more engaged in thinking about what is your image of the ideal mentor or mentoring relationship? Who do you want to be as you develop into a mentor, as you take on mentees? What are you striving for in that relationship? So I can't see you all at all, but I had asked that there be some paper and some pens, markers in the room. Are we set with that?
Yes, we sure are. We're passing them out right now.
Okay, thank you. So as you pass them out, I want you to start thinking about and reflecting, all of you all, on that ideal mentor or mentoring relationship. We are not going to be, well, you're not going to be judged at all, but you're certainly not going to be judged on your artistic ability. I, for one, have zero artistic ability. I would use stick figures if it were me doing this again. I'll give you about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, since again, we're short on time. Maybe let's try to do it in 8 minutes. So around 12:37
Yeah.
or so. And then we'll decide how we want to, if I think you're sitting in twos, as I recall from seeing how the room is set up.
Yeah, either twos or threes.
Twos or threes. So why don't you take about between 5 and 8 minutes to do your drawing, and then I want you to just in groups of 2 or 3, just share your drawings and the themes that have emerged. What was similar to what your partner or partners drew? What's different? And if one of you all can just take notes on that, we're not going to have time for all of you to report out. And if possible, I love seeing these drawings. I don't know whether if you hold them up, I'll be able to see them, but we'll worry about that when we get there. And to lower the artistic bar, I hope, I want to show you some that I've collected over the last year or so that I've been doing this, using this approach. Here's one or two. I'll show you another couple. We happen to have colored markers for this one session. I put these together because they're 2 fishing metaphors. And then this one, a little bit more complex. You see kind of the road, marching along the road here. And you can put a few words in there. Mostly I want you to use kind of your non-verbal brain to try to depict this.
Does everybody have paper now?
Yeah, if you don't get a crayon, use your pen. You don't have one, you cannot share with anyone. So don't.
Crayon's great, whatever. Okay, any questions, or you ready to go with it? So I'll need somebody in the room just to give me a thumbs up or something, so I know when we're ready to come back together, because then we'll have a group discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Have fun. So maybe a couple of you all can just share what the process was like for you, what some of the themes were that came up. You can hold up your drawing, at least show others in the room if you feel comfortable doing that, and just share a little bit what came up for you, what new insights you had. Oops, now it's just me on the screen. Yikes.
I can share.
And thank you. Oh,
Hello?
all right, got you all bigger.
I
Great.
don't know if you can see it because it's in green.
I can see the amazing hairstyle.
Do you want to talk a little bit about
So-
what you have on there?
I can describe it. So it's 2 people. And I drew some kind of arrows pointing at both of them because we discussed here the exchange between mentor and mentee. And yeah, I really like my drawing, but I don't know if you can see it.
Take a picture of it. Vince has.
Oh, yeah.
He has my cell phone
Right.
number or my email. You can just send it to me. Love to see it. Anybody who
Great.
feels like sharing, I'd love to see them, and I'm happy to comment on them. But so you're kind of illustrating this reciprocity, this sharing, this giving and take in the mentoring relationship, which is lovely.
Yeah, that was the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful, important concept. Who else would like to share?
Yeah, I can share mine. So,
Okay, in the front and then in the back. Thank you.
yeah, I drew a road. The car is me. There's various obstacles on the road, so it's kind of like a race. And my mentor is here on the side telling me what obstacles are coming up ahead since they've driven this road. They know where the obstacles are. I don't, so I can't see around the turn. So they're telling me where those various obstacles are and how to avoid them. And I also drew it this way too, because I think that the path one takes or the line one takes as they, matriculate through their career, that's up to them. I think the mentor or the sponsor is more so there to tell them where obstacles are and where they can avoid certain things. But I think it's important for the mentor to remember that the path is ultimately up to them.
Lovely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So many things come up from that as well. One that comes to mind is just the role of the mentor in helping support that mentee or sponsor and taking some risks. Like I'm picturing as you're driving down the road with all these obstacles, a little bit scary, and you may bump into them. They're a little bit risky, right? That road is not, it's not a straight country road with like nothing on it. And that's not true of lives and careers, particularly if you're going to, have an interesting life and career. And so part of that role that you'll take on as a mentor, or look for in mentors, is to help guide you, help point things right, but maybe sometimes get in that car and ride alongside with you, I suppose. Sometimes but mostly you're all adults, you're mentoring adults, you're helping them, you help protect them from the things that could really smash up their car, but they're driving the car. And I love that. I love that concept. Thank you for sharing that. And then in the back, I think there was a hand up. Yeah, thank you.
Great job, Josh. That was really good. So I don't know if you can see my gray drawing here. It borrows a little bit from parenting. There's a new baby in the family, and they were talking about lighthouse parenting and how you want to be a beacon that helps direct your kid or your mentees, but you're not hovering, you're not sort of telling them what they have to do, but you're a point of reference. And so that same idea of like alerting them to dangers and things that you want to avoid, providing that guidance while supporting independence is the idea there. And then I tried to draw like a pyramid structure of like the top mentor, say PI, enabling and empowering their grad students to be co-mentors to each other, and then also encouraging them to start mentoring undergrads. So you have a pyramid of mentorship and multiple points of reference. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. So you're also bringing out this concept of a mentoring team, right? It's not generally, you might have that primary dyadic relationship, but as you all know, to be successful in your careers or to help others be successful, it's really going to be a team of mentors and advisors who are helping you move forward. And the other piece that came out, yeah, you don't want to be a helicopter mentor, just like you don't want to be a helicopter parent, right? I think that's the term. And so part of it is being able to stand back and let your mentee learn sometimes through their own mistakes. That comes up sometimes just very concretely as we're trying to help people write, improve their writing, right? And generally sort of comments are better than track changes to get very concrete about kind of mentoring in that context, right? And people are going to learn through their own trial and error rather than have you tell them what to do. There's a role for advice giving, but we, particularly those of us who are in medical professionals, way overemphasize that. We like to fix things. We much better off taking a step back and being really good listeners rather than looking for opportunities to give advice. And I think that's generally almost always more helpful and what's really needed at the time. So yeah, thank you for that. Again, really super concepts. And let me get back to here. Thank you. I wish we could hear from all of you. And obviously you can feel free to continue this conversation. I encourage you to keep those drawings, keep them in front of you. It'll remind you what you're kind of aiming for, what your ideal relationship looks like.
Perfect.
Back? Okay, we're back. Good. So let me just go over some of the qualities of outstanding mentors. This is a qualitative study that we published a number of years ago in the American Journal of Medicine. And there are 5 themes that came out from this qualitative study. One, and these are sort of admirable or admired characteristics of outstanding mentors. These are mentors who were nominated for the Lifetime Achievement of Mentoring Award at UCSF that I created a number of years ago. Number one is just having admirable characteristics. To be a great mentor, you want to be inspiring and trustworthy, somewhat selfless, but it can't totally live on that alone. And of course, competent and knowledgeable. The other is just making the time. Oftentimes, and I heard Harinder talking about earlier on that he had some bad mentorship. We call that the tormentor, right? But most of the time,
You are absolutely right.
we're not really, coming up against people who are really malignant. But more often in our environments, it's people who really want to do good, want to be helpful, but they truly just don't have the time to do it. So if you're going to take on mentees, and this could be part of a case study, a longer conversation, you need to make sure you've got the time and the competence to be able to truly help them. And just that time commitment is absolutely key. And that depends upon what role are you taking here. Are you the lead mentor in a career development award? Are you a co-mentor? Are you providing methodologic consultation? Are you the clinical person on that team? There's all kinds of, are you the career mentor? There are all kinds of different roles, and they require a different level of time commitment, as well as, of course, different attributes, different characteristics that you're bringing to that relationship. But the time piece is really key and just requires some very being honest with yourself and having the mentee make sure that they're honest also with what they need, or that they reflect on truly what they need. The third area is providing support for personal professional balance. This quote summarizes it nicely. He truly supports those whom he mentors in all aspects of life. If we have time, I'll end today by talking a little bit about personal professional balance. I think is absolutely key to everything you do in your career development. The fourth is legacy of mentoring. This quote underscores that as well. She provided the example that I attempt to emulate as I begin to mentor my own students, fellows, and junior faculty. And probably this is already happening for you as you're thinking about developing your own style of mentorship. You're thinking about mentors that you've had, and part of the absolute joy of being a mentor is passing on this legacy of mentoring and watching your mentees start mentoring others, and they're passing on what they've learned from you and approaches. That legacy that stays on, lives on long after perhaps one retires and stops doing that work. And finally, mentors, whether it's in a research context or any context, also serve as career guides. Again, underscoring this sort of helping guide people down the road, their professional and personal road or path. I love this quote. She continues to accurately assess my skills, knowledge, and attitudes, and to challenge me to seek higher personal achievement than I would on my own. So he is an outstanding mentor because is an outstanding mentor, typo, because she saw what I could become. She saw what I could become. And that idea that the mentor, that you as the mentor, sees the potential in the mentee even before they can see it in themselves is incredibly powerful. You're believing in them, believing that they can be successful, believing that they can do it, helping building their not only confidence, but their sense of self-efficacy is a powerful predictor of also future success. And maybe even more so for first generation to college, first generation to graduate school, et cetera, where perhaps only what they had before were no other role models and had only seen barriers in their path. And to have somebody believe that you can do it and you can succeed can be life-changing for them. Why career mentoring? And I really put a lot of focus on that because it's essential for all faculty or grad students or postdocs, regardless of what you're doing. Career mentors challenge mentees to ask fundamental questions. What career path has the greatest potential to lead to success and personal professional fulfillment? We're always busy making choices in our careers, what fellowship to apply for, what grant to apply for, what lab to join, et cetera. But rarely do we take the time to reflect on our underlying values that should be informing those choices. And the role, I think, one of the key roles in a mentoring relationship, and this is a photo from a garden in Japan. I spent a sabbatical year there studying mentorship and academic medicine. And this is what career mentors help. We get to your stage of career or those you're mentoring, they're only generally good choices, but you have to make choices. And those should be made upon reflection of your values. Okay, what are your fundamental values, both professional and personal? And that's this role of the mentor as a trusted counselor or guide, definition from the Oxford English Dictionary. And again, this opportunity for self-reflection and value clarification. What other professional relationship gives you the opportunity, or I would argue, challenges you to practice self-reflection. Why am I on this career path? Where do I want to go in my life and my career? How do I balance that with my personal values? And there may be times where those personal values rise higher. That may be happy times where you're, having a child, for example. They may be difficult times if there's an illness or something else going on in your life that's taking your time away from your work. And then you have to re-examine the choices that you're making and how you're spending your time. I like this Sufi image because, again, what you all had talked about, it captures a sense of reciprocity in the mentoring relationship, the arrows going both ways. Of course, you're going to have a whole session on mentoring across differences or culturally aware mentoring, but just to remind you that part of the skills of a competent, outstanding mentor is knowing how to mentor and feeling comfortable and seeing these differences as opportunities and strengths rather than as barriers in the relationship. And that certainly was very true to me as I spent the year in Japan and published this article there as a result of my work there, and found that my conception of what made for an outstanding mentor, what picture would I draw, is quite different from what they would draw in the context of the environment at Kyoto University, where I spent a year. And that was eye-opening to me. You can't just take a conception of what makes for ideal mentoring and translate it across cultures, or perhaps even within our different subcultures and communities within our own context, our own universities. And again, to remind you that part of being a great mentor are keeping in mind these different roles on the mentoring team. Are you the career mentor? Are you the research or scholarly mentor? Are you a co-mentor who may be the epidemiologist on the team, who isn't just there to provide methodologic advice, but to actually also, they're in there for the long term with that mentee. Peer mentors, very important, but maybe not part of this core team. Maybe not, or advisors. And I'll talk more about sponsorship when we get there. And this qualitative study looked at characteristics of successful and failed mentoring relationships. We found, maybe not surprisingly perhaps, that the two main things that came out from this qualitative research done at UCSF and University of Toronto that made success, that were part of the ingredients, the secret sauce, you might say, of successful mentoring relationships, are a sense of reciprocity and clear expectations or alignment. Now, again, I know you have a whole session devoted to alignment, which is appropriate, because if you don't have alignment in mentoring relationships, it ain't going to be successful. That is absolutely key. And it does deserve a whole separate session and case discussion to focus on that. I'll just say one thing after saying that it is key, that I imagine as part of that session, you'll be talking about the individual development plan or career development plan. That is the tool you use to help promote and continually check in on alignment in a mentoring relationship. It also can be used to help that mentee figure out what is sometimes commonly called their true north. Where are they going? And how can you as the mentor help them get there in their career? That conversation is important. It's equally important then to try to commit it to specific goals and down to the level of SMART goals, if you're familiar with them, that are specific, measurable, achievable, etc. Okay. So again, I can do a 2-hour session just on this concept, but I want to introduce this to you at this sort of opening session. What leads to failed relationships? Just, the hardest thing we do as humans is communicate clearly with one another. Our current political climate clearly underscores that. One mentee said if there's a lack of communication for, what the mentor expects and what the mentee expects, that's a recipe for disaster, hearkening back to the need for alignment. And then for you to be thinking about as more junior budding mentors, do you have the experience, the knowledge, or the skills to actually be the main, let's say, lead research mentor here? Or do you want to look for a co-mentoring relationship or some other way to build your mentoring skills without taking on a mentee that you may not be ready to take on? The other area where one can get into trouble when you're junior is that you both still need to be first author on the paper, right? You're still in that career development phase. And you have people who are more near peer in a near peer mentoring relationship. You have to just be very clear on whose project is this? You know, who's really taking the lead here? Am I ready to step into that senior author role and be the senior mentor here? Or am I not really quite ready? I'm still developing this area. These are all important things for you all to be thinking about as you transition into this role as a mentor. And for me, I might have shown this a decade ago, Vince, when I was down there. And I always show this still, because I love this just beautiful illustration of active listening in the mentoring relationship. Reminded me of that helicopter parent illustration that you shared, one of you shared. Because if I hear myself talking too much, like I am now, because I'm giving you a talk, but in the context of a mentoring relationship, it's not going well. I should be listening, and I should be asking questions, speaking in sentences, and hearing paragraphs back from my mentee. That's generally a successful meeting. So one needs to do that by being a really effective, active listener, which is really hard to do if we don't practice and pay attention to it. And I love this beautiful summary, this beautiful illustration of what active listening is from this Chinese character, kanji, this old style kanji or Chinese character. Because to listen, we listen to with our eyes and our ears, with full attention and one heart. And that's when you sit down to meet with a mentee, whether it's for 10 minutes or an hour, you should be listening with full attention and one heart. Full attention and one heart. All right. So we can pause. We've got more stuff to cover, but we may not necessarily cover it all. I would rather be responsive to what's on your mind, if anything, at this point. And you've turned back into little ants on my screen. So I won't be able to see if you raise your hand, but somebody could just let me know. How are you doing? Do you need to stand up and stretch? Are we good? Okay. So part 2 is going to be on, and again, feel free, please, just to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Jump in, please. Part 2 is on sponsorship. I really want to introduce this to you. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about this, a little bit of time studying and doing some publishing on this as well. I think this is actually an absolute key component to having a culture of mentorship and sponsorship, a supportive culture at UCI for professional development. You've got to be thinking about sponsorship, not just mentorship as well. Luckily, it's often embedded within the context of a mentoring relationship. So for you all to be thinking about when is it appropriate for me to be a mentor here? When should I step outside of that and be a sponsor? And actually, just put show of hands. Is this how many of you are already fairly familiar with this term? I didn't see any hands go up. Was that right? No hands? One hand? Okay. A little bit familiar? So let's get into this. So what is sponsorship? It's active support and advocacy. And by the way, this is a definition that Dr. Mia Williams and I have come up with from the literature. It's a little bit different than what you might read if you put in Google or read some of the other literature. I like this definition better. It's active support and advocacy by a person in a strategically influential position aimed at protecting and championing the career advancement of an individual. Sponsorship is focused on career advancement. Okay, that psychosocial support piece, that more comprehensive nature is not embedded in the sponsorship relationship. It may be there, I suppose, not part of it. So why sponsorship? It complements and amplifies mentorship. It's part of the generativity, right? It's part of how you can pass it on, pay it forward to that next generation coming up behind you. It's also important for you all at this stage in your career, be thinking about who are my sponsors, not just who are my mentors. And importantly, it can enhance equity and career advancement. So I think if we're looking at mentorship to address the continuing inequities and the lack of diversity in the biomedical research enterprise. We're not going to get there unless we also focus on sponsorship. Okay, that's mostly an evidence-based statement, but definitely my strongly held opinion, and really important in the context of sponsorship to pay attention to implicit bias. And hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that a little bit as we go along. So how do mentorship and sponsorship compare? This is a tip sheet I think I sent to Marguerite or somebody there to hand out to you all, as well as our sponsorship toolkit. This is just the top half of the tip sheet. But you can see mentorship focused on career development, sponsorship career advancement, mentorship on personal and professional development, sponsorship on specific career advancing opportunities. Mentorship may be a transformative relationship, sponsorship more transactional, not in a negative sense, but it's situational. How can I help you get that position? How can I help you advance in this way? And then I may not talk to you for another 6 months, or maybe ever again. Maybe it was just in that situation. Mentorship usually longitudinal, sponsorship often episodic. In fact, almost always episodic. And this is a much simpler way of thinking about it. Mentorship, have you tried applying to speak at conferences and meetups already? Nice mentoring question. Sponsorship, I recommended you for the speaking gig. Can you do it? I've already reached out to the organizer of the conference and said, you should be calling on my mentee to run this session because they're fabulous. I know you asked me to do it, but I want you to ask them to do it because they're great. That's active sponsorship for one of my mentees, as opposed to telling them, hey, there's this opportunity. I think you should go for it, which may be perfectly appropriate at other times. Okay, and one's not better than the other. They're just different. So we did a study, and I'll just share this with you briefly. I don't want to take too much time with this, at UCSF, to look at faculty knowledge, actions, and perceptions of sponsorship, a survey. And I want to say that Dr. Mia Williams was really the lead here and is first author on this paper as a result. What we found was quite interesting, which is why I was curious where you all were at in terms of your familiarity. Because if you look at this chart, our assistant professors, 91% of them, before we gave a standard definition for the rest of the survey, said they were familiar with it, whereas only 38% of our full professors were. Now, the full professors should be the ones in a position often to be sponsors, and yet they didn't really know what that meant. Again, only about a third of them said they really were familiar with it. When we asked, so if you ever had a sponsor and defined it for them, started getting a little more even. And then when we did you ever receive an act of sponsorship, which we defined in a variety of ways, it was pretty evenly across the board. And in fact, about 87% of faculty overall had at least one act of sponsorship. Now, that could have simply been somebody once wrote me a letter of recommendation for something, right? That's serving as a sponsor. So if we think about it, most of us couldn't have gotten anywhere in our careers without that happening to us periodically. Interestingly, 70% of sponsors and more than half of sponsees reported sponsorship was from the mentor. So again, I'm bringing this up in the context of mentor training because you want to be thinking about sponsorship as part of the skill set of an effective mentor. Okay, in this context, in this part of your skill set as an effective mentor or mentee. We allowed comments, and so much came up around also disparities in access to sponsorship. So you need to be thinking about who are you sponsoring and why you're sponsoring this person and not that person, so that sponsorship can address inequities and opportunities for career advancement, not replicate them, not continue our monoculture that we've had in the health sciences fields forever that's been dominated by white men. And part of the reason for that, I think, is sponsorship. So it can be a powerful tool. Here's just two quick quotes. Our biases around what a particular person should look like for particular roles keeps us from sponsoring certain people who have not served in those roles previously. And this other quote from a professor, Latinx professor, I never was sponsored, and that's the problem, right? And that is the problem. Yes, he's right. we did do a scoping review. We published in DGIM, Journal of General Medicine, on sponsorship and equity, saying, is there any evidence out there that sponsorship can help address inequity and opportunities for career advancement? The relative consensus was yes, it seems to promote equity and career advancement, but we don't really yet know what are the really best practices in sponsorship in a way that we have a better sense of best practice in mentoring. And I've already handed these toolkits. I think you've already have the toolkits. If not, you can find them on the Academic Affairs website at UCSF. So I want to get to another exercise before we run out of time. And with your forbearance, if we can go about 10 minutes past, half past the hour, I think we can kind of complete what I'd love to get done. Is that all right? Marguerite, Vince, Rinder, you guys, can you stick around to about 1:40? I need a yes or no. Marguerite, are we good until about 1:40? Or Vince? Yes? It seems like my audio from the room is gone.
Same, me too. I'm trying to figure that out for you.
Okay.
Because I think they're speaking, but I don't think we could hear them. I think, Marguerite, I think the laptop might be muted. If you want to unmute the laptop.
Thank you.
Well, I don't see anybody getting up and leaving, so I'm assuming you're good to just continue.
Yeah. Okay. I'm usually not putting people to sleep, so I think you all can hear me. Is that right? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
they-
Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
I'm so sorry, but we apparently we can't hear you, those of us on Zoom.
Yeah, sorry, somehow this got muted and I was busy passing things out, but yes, you're good to go.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
so let's do the map. And then and we'll go a little bit past half past since we started a bit late and I was ambitious perhaps in what I wanted to cover with you all today. So I want you to use this opportunity. So you get the maps in front of you now. Why the map? So it allows you to visually identify your mentors and mentees, your sponsors, sponsees, and then also what's missing on your map. Who are your potential sponsors and potential mentors or potential mentees and sponsees? And to reflect on, again, opportunities to expand or diversify your network. Where are you going in your career? How can your mentors, sponsors help? And how can you be helping if your current mentors, mentees, sponsees, or maybe people where would you like to be growing your mentoring and sponsoring role? So I'll show you one this is from Dr. Mia Williams, who I've been working with. And you can see there's sort of three areas. People who help get the job done, who help advance the career, or who help, who give you get personal support from, or you're giving personal support to. The dotted line is interinstitutional. The solid line is in the institution. I want you to be thinking about those who have a different identity from you. Do you need more who are different, or perhaps some of you who are perhaps historically underrepresented are looking for more mentors or mentees who are more like you? So it depends on who you are and how you're going to better diversify or your map or align it with what you would like it to look like. At your stage, you're probably going to have more folks above the line than below the line, maybe more mentor sponsors than you have mentees, sponsees. And again, these categories are getting the job done. Who are you helping to get the job done, or who's helping you through the provision of, again, important information, introductions. That might be sponsorship, science or technical advice, professional expertise, or probably more mentors or other resources. Through career advancement, career guidance and direction are your mentors. Arranged exposure to critical people are your sponsors. So again, these are going to be a combination of sponsors and mentors, and you can put a little M or a little S next to them to indicate, like Mia did here, whether they're a mentor or a sponsor or both. Okay, and then personal support, which are going to be more your mentors or the people you go to, or who advocate for you, again, who may be sponsors, people who are there to advocate for you. Okay, so all those of you who help get the job done, help around career advancement, or where you're helping them with their career advancement, or getting, and as Mia illustrates here, you can have more than one shape around a particular person. Okay, and I think you'll find this very useful to actually visualize what your map looks like now, and over the next year or 2 years, how you want to build that out, both above the line in terms of mentorship, mentors, sponsors you need, as well as below the line. So I'll just give you about 5 minutes to work on this. And then maybe rather than sharing in the room, I'll ask for a couple of volunteers to just talk to me about your map. And again, as you're doing this, after you finish it, I want you to reflect on how diverse is your network. What are the opportunities to expand or diversify it, both above and below the line? What sponsees and sponsors should you be reaching out to? Are there potential sponsors for you you've not yet connected with? And I'd love for you to leave today with an actual plan. Pick one person you're going to reach out to, either a junior person or a more senior person for you. So I'll be quiet for 5 minutes and let you finish it. We'll let you work on these. Okay, why don't we come back together? I think, again, this is another exercise. I want you to hang on to these, and perhaps you can find another time as well to continue this conversation. This is not meant to be a static document, that you fill out now and then you file away. Keep it live, keep it active, keep reflecting on this as you move on, even during this year, as you're developing your mentoring skills and knowledge. So I'd be curious to hear how this was for you as you kind of put what was probably more in your head as an organization, kind of have a sense of who is in your network, to be thinking it more, concretely, who's actually in your network now, and who are potential mentors, sponsors, mentees, sponsees. What was this like for you? Any new insights? And again, new insights are great. New actions are even better. So we can go from insight to, who do you want to reach out to? What changes do you want to make? How do you want to better diversify or not your mentorship, sponsorship network or map? So who would like to just share a few new insights or thoughts? What was this like for you? Was it useful?
I can share. So this is really useful for me. I found that I have a lot of mentees, but not a lot of mentors. And so I haven't advanced yet, so I know some of my committee members will be a part of that mentorship, but it does make me want to play a more active role in finding those mentors and sponsors. So I think this is very useful.
Thank you. And where are you at? And are you on your junior, you're on faculty?
So I just started my 3rd year for the PhD program. So
3rd year, okay. Wow, okay. So, and you're already engaged in a lot of mentoring, but somehow, so that's a really important insight. Thank you for sharing that. And great. So you'll reflect some on who you want to reach out to, and where are those gaps in your team of mentors, sponsors, and how are you going to start filling that in? That sounds like a really important insight. Thank you for sharing that. Who else?
I can share.
Yep. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm a postdoc. And I would say that I don't know that anything surprised me about this, but I think it did give me some insights about how different values and qualities of my own maybe are impacting mentorship and mentoring in different ways. I think I definitely if I didn't already know it, now concretely know that I have probably too many mentees and I'm stretched a little thin. But I think it was really good for me to kind of think about what I'm contributing and getting and how I can, even maybe without building new relationships, because I have built a not extensive, but like a network as a postdoc, but how I can better strategically utilize those connections and relationships in either direction.
Lovely. Thank you. Sounds like a very important insight as well. Thank you for sharing that. And you both commented on mentoring relationships and having your relationship to your mentees. What about and the need for some more mentors as well? What about sponsors and your opportunity? Like, do you feel like you're in a position to serve as sponsors for some of your mentees, or are you already doing that? And what about where you're headed with your career? Do you have access to the people you feel like you need access to help with your own career advancement? And did any of that insight come out in filling this out for any of you?
So I had not heard of the term sponsorship before, so I want to thank you for introducing that, because I was really thinking through that as I was putting my map together and realizing that I've had some really wonderful mentors who have also fulfilled the sponsorship sort of role as well. And then also reflecting, I think, for my mentees, I feel like some of them I have been able to do that for them, but it made me think a little bit more about maybe areas that I can act as a sponsor, facilitate that for them a little more.
Nice, beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Fabulous. All right. Well, I appreciate that. And again, hopefully this is just the beginning of you kind of being able to use this tool for some more insights about where you're at and where you want to go, both as as mentors, sponsors, mentees, sponsees, and continue to maybe come back to this during the next 6 weeks, I guess you have together. Or during those case discussions where it's going to be really maybe an opportunity to talk about they're all mentoring cases, but you may bring in then what would potentially be the role of a sponsor here to help advocate, protect, you help with career advancement and that in the situation of the case that you're looking at. Just one summary slide from this, which is I love talking about this again, to come back to like, why are we doing this work as mentors? Why do we have mentees? How are we ultimately trying to help them? And really, in the big picture, we're trying to help them define what is their career sweet spot, like where are they going, and how can we help them get there? I mentioned the IDP as a tool for that as well, but really thinking about what do we mean by this career sweet spot? And it's something you love, something the world needs, something you're paid to do on the pragmatic level, and something you're great at least really good at. And this intersection of your passion, your mission, your vocation, and your profession. We can't always live in this sweet spot, this red box, this intersection of our passion, mission, profession, vocation. Right? There's sometimes just some stuff you got to get done in your career and your life that isn't necessarily where you want to be spending your time, but sometimes you just got to do the laundry, right? And we've got the equivalent of laundry in our professional lives as well. But you really want to be thinking about, what is this? And if you're in the mentoring role, how can I help you, my mentee, both identify this sweet spot and keep you moving in that direction? Whether that is as a mentor, as a sponsor, as a co-mentor, etc. So if you think about this, mentors help you envision your career sweet spot and set your goals. And in many ways, sponsors help you get there by advocating for you, by helping to promote your career advancement. It's one way of trying to articulate how these two roles really complement each other really beautifully in a relationship. I want to pause here. I'm just going to spend the last 5 minutes talking about personal professional integration. And I prefer the term integration rather than balance, because those of us with busy professional lives are never going to have a balance in our lives of how much time I spend at work and how much time I spend at home. But we want to be thinking about how do we integrate these different aspects of ourselves so they don't feel like they're in conflict. We want them to be in concert with one another. Sometimes there's conflict in terms of how we spend the time, but we want to be thinking about approaching that as sort of an authentically whole person, both in being present in our professional lives, our careers, as well as at home. And that will change as you move along in your career, right? I don't have kids living at home anymore. When I did, I made sure to be home at, 5 o'clock for dinner, 5:30 or 6, or, valued certain things on the weekends. I probably got less done than I got. The danger when kids leave is that you can then work all the time. So then there's other ways of thinking about personal professional integration. But other questions, and sponsorship seems like maybe it was a relatively new term for you. Are there other questions about sponsorship that we should address before I wrap up? Or anything else I talked about?
I actually have a question regarding being an active listener, because you also brought up a point for asking questions. Are there like a good way for asking questions with your mentee or mentors? Because I find it's challenging to ask the right question to figure out what's going on.
As a mentor, I'm sorry, is that what you asked? Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think oftentimes, and I don't know how many of you are any of you also clinicians in the room, or most of you are PhD on the PhD track and scientists, researchers, I think. Because this maybe comes a little bit more naturally to those of us working in the clinical domain, but anybody who's ever been in a relationship, which I presume is all of you, one sort or another, knows that what you all know as well, it feels really good when you know the other person is truly listening to you and not just waiting for you to stop speaking, right? That's that one definition of, being a very poor active listener is just waiting for the other person to stop talking, right? So that you can then get your word in. That's not active listening. So you active listen both with questions. I'll start with, body language. So you're communicating that you're paying attention by shifting your attention towards that person, nodding, using other ways with your body to illustrate that you're present with them. Eye contact. Again, and some of this may be culturally dependent upon, is eye contact appropriate, too much, too little, etc. Body position, too close, too far. So this is where there's nuances in, because we communicate a lot through nonverbal communication, and we should be aware of that, using that as a powerful tool as well for engaging with our mentees. Then in terms of the questions, I'd say, and this just comes from like the psychologist Erik Erikson, right? You often get a lot out by just saying, tell me more about that. What did you mean by that? Explain a little bit more about why you did it that way. Really, what are known as open-ended questions are generally much better. If you really need more information, you need to go from the tell me more to, how did you calculate that, that effect size or whatever. You need to then cone down to get more specific in your questions. But I think when you're talking to people and you're stepping back and you're having that career mentoring meeting, you want to be talking about, asking them about, like, where do you envision yourself 3 to 5 years from now? What really gives you pleasure in your work? What gives you the most gratification? What's most frustrating for you around your work? Tell me a little bit more about that. Those kinds of questions can really help to establish that rapport, the trust, and the relationship. And once you have that in a mentoring relationship, you're good, right? You can help them through hard times, difficult times, challenging decisions and things like that, right? But you build that essential relationship, that trusting, open, confidential relationship. And you can say everything we talk about in here is going to be kept confidential. There may be exceptions to that where you think that they're impaired. In a clinic, again, if I have clinical mentees and they're coming to work, impaired, Obviously, I have to break that confidentiality, but luckily that's an extraordinarily rare, time. You can most of the time keep this, and that's really important in a career mentoring relationship. So open-ended, mostly listening, sometimes just going, uh-huh, uh-huh. You don't have to say anything. People like to be heard, and so you just kind of give them some indication that you're hearing them and listening. They'll go on and open up a little bit more. The more you try to cone down too soon, the more you're going to end up in a more narrow alley of information rather than keeping it broad, and you learn so much that way. If they're coming to you for advice, that's a different situation. That's a different kind of interaction. Was that helpful?
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. I will say that it's one of the hardest things that we can do, right? Is really truly be present and listen deeply. So it's not, but there are some sort of tricks to it, and I think those are a couple of tips, a couple of things I just shared with you. Anything else? That's an open-ended question for you. Turns out from the medical literature that saying what else actually elicits more information and more open-ended information from patients than saying anything else. And I have no idea why that is, but that has been studied. So we try to teach our residents to say what else rather than anything else, but there you go. All right, so let me spend the last 5 minutes with you just talking about this idea of personal professional integration, because unless you're feeling comfortable in your various roles, including your role as mentor, sponsor, but your other professional roles as researcher and your personal roles as in your relationships, outside of work, it's going to be hard for you to be truly present and to be an effective listener as a mentor. So it's super important. And I think the generations that have come after me, certainly both my kids, have paid much more attention to this than I ever did earlier in my career. Unfortunately, kind of a prototypical baby boomer, where we didn't focus on this, and to the detriment of many of us. So I think, the first principle is to put that oxygen mask on yourself first. So you can't be an effective mentor unless you really be thinking about also your own well-being, both physical and emotional. Okay, so a little tip from the airline. The other is just thinking about what helps to give you that sense of presence and integration. For me, and as for many people, it's often being outdoors. We're lucky to live in a beautiful state with a lot of opportunities to get out. So that's what my wife and I like to do, and just, 15 minutes from our home to be hiking on Mount Tam. Never a bad thing. The Japanese call this, right, forest bathing, right, to just get out into nature. That's true for a lot of people. The other thing to be thinking about is that we're always going to be juggling, right? You're all busy people. There's a lot of things going on in your life, I'm sure, already. And you only get busier, frankly, as you move on in your career with more responsibilities and more things, both on the personal level and the professional level that you're juggling. But I like this photo because we have to remember that some of the things we're juggling are crystal balls. Okay, those are the things you don't want to drop. Guess where most of those crystal balls, if not all of them, are? In your personal life. Okay. Vince was very kind to say, I've, gone up the ranks here and I have all these important positions. The truth is, if I disappeared tomorrow, there'd be 100 other people who could do my job, right? Probably half of them better than I'm doing it. But at home, I'm really the only one who can be a husband, a father. I've had to really step up and be a son for my parents, the last couple of years that they've declined in health, and my dad passed a few months ago. And so that role from being cared for, by one's parents to caring for them happens as one gets older as well. And that's where my focus on the personal piece had to take precedent oftentimes over staying later at work and getting extra work done. I had to go, check on them. Was making those decisions when my kids were younger as well. So what are the crystal balls? What are those things you don't want to drop? And what are those things that if you do drop, you can pick them back up? They're not gonna, they're not gonna get cracked. And I told you I spent a year in Japan, for me, oftentimes as well, being in that context, I'm not a Buddhist or Shinto, and this is from a Shinto shrine in Japan that some of you may have been to Fujimi Inari outside of Kyoto. But I found this both kind of a nice that road metaphor again, that path metaphor around mentorship, but also to be thinking about my own kind of path and trying to find some solace and solitude along the way. This is 10,000 tories from Fushimi Inari in Japan. And I'll just end with this poem by Wendell Berry. He wrote, "It may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And that when we no longer know which way to go, we have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings." So thanks so much. It was really fun working with you guys today.
Mitch, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
If you have any further questions for Dr. Feldman, then I think we're done for today. Mitch, thank you so much and fantastic.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful rest of your day, you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Very inspirational.
Yeah.